From the moment we wake up until we drift into deep slumber, a constant companion whispers within us. You probably guessed it. It's the internal voice that does nothing else but comment, judge, and sometimes plan. It feels so familiar, so personal, that we often believe it to be our actual self. But is it really? Or is it something else entirely? This inner voice is the most intimate part of our experience here on Earth. It comments on what we're doing at this very moment, what might happen next, and what we should have done differently the last time we spoke to our boss. Make no mistake, it sounds like us only because it is using our tone and our words. Of course, it knows our perceived preferences, remembers our past, and anticipates our future. For you see, because it feels so close and authentic, we actually assume it's the voice of our true self. But what if that's simply a pipe dream, a form of self-deception, if you will? Most of us never question this constant inner narration of everything that happens. And why would we? For all intents and purposes, the thoughts we hear are us. Who is to say that the voice in our head isn't the voice of our true being? However, this automatic identification is a conditioned delusion, built over years of social influence and especially upbringing. To understand why this is so, we need to trace the origins of our inner voice and the nature of the self it seems to represent back to the source. Before language, there was no inner commentary. As infants, we experience the world through sensations, sights, sounds, without naming or labeling them. We simply are one with our experiences, without separating ourselves from what we perceive. Makes you wonder, if the people who lived before language was invented were all enlightened, doesn't it? But as we grow, we begin to use words because that's the only way to function in society. We learn to say me, mine, I, and my. Suddenly, experience is divided into self and other. And contrary to what you might have heard, this division isn't intuitive, but rather something we absorb through language and culture. Over time, we begin to see ourselves as separate entities that are permanent and central to our experience. This sense of separation is reinforced by parents, teachers, society, and media. The internal voice becomes simply a mirror of this conditioned identity. It adopts our preferences and echoes our memories, and then, eventually, reflects our emotional tone. Over time, it becomes more and more familiar, and eventually it appears to be us. Speaking with our voice, tone, and perspective, one day it actually seems to carry our authority, and because of this familiarity, we trust it without question. For you see, the inner voice isn't just some random chatter, but really a storyteller, constantly creating some form of narrative about who we are. In fact, all it really does is gather stories of successes and failures, likes and dislikes, fears and desires. And out of those it evaluates, judges, and creates a mental image, an identity, so to speak, that feels solid and real. But make no mistake, this identity is nothing more than a mental construct, a collection of stories and memories. It's only a story of me, a character that we believe is the real us. But this story is a mirage that is fleeting and fragile, maintained by repetition and reinforcement, like a character in a play that keeps performing the same lines over and over again. Because this seemingly true voice more often than not shows up without our permission. Like that annoying guy who wants to sell us some insurance we don't need, we, at some point, feel it is our own, telling us the truth and nothing but the truth. Yet, What we seem to forget all the time is that most thoughts are simply automatic reactions, labels, judgments, and interpretations born from past conditioning. They are not who we are, but what we think. So when some thought appears, like I'm tired, or they don't like me, or I should have done better, it feels personal. But is it really? We just assume it belongs to us. But in reality, thoughts are just subjective events, labels and interpretations that pop up in consciousness. They don't really belong to anyone. They are temporary, nothing more. The sense of ownership we feel is really only an unintentional habit. When the mind says, "I feel anxious," it's easy to believe that the anxiety is us. But anxiety is just a sensation, a feeling that will eventually pass. The thought, "I am anxious," is a label attached to that sensation. Just as cars pass on the highway, feelings and thoughts come and go. They neither define us nor do they belong to us. The voice in your head says things like, "I see, I think, I feel." But in reality, these are just words. The actual seeing, feeling, and experiencing happen before the thought or label appears. There's a space of pure awareness that notices thoughts without identifying with them. See this right now. Wait for the next thought and ask, who or what sees this voice? Who or what sees these thoughts? There is a fundamental difference between the thoughts and the awareness that notices those thoughts. As previously established, the voice in your head is only a narrator that comments, interprets, and reports. But it is not the doer of experience, even if it might seem like it. The true self is the one who perceives thoughts without attachment. This awareness is unshakable and wordless. All it does is see. It is the background of all experience, untouched by the stories it observes. The experience of seeing, feeling, and knowing always happens before the voice begins to narrate. The mind responds to experience with labels and stories, but the pure seeing, without words, always comes first. And this awareness is your true nature. Although it might seem like the inner voice seems to track reality in real time, it actually lags behind quite a bit. All it does is simply labeling what has already happened or what is happening now. She looks upset. I am tired. This is difficult. The experience of seeing or feeling precedes the commentary. You see, the voice responds, but it does not create experience. And still, because of its quick and confident appearance, we believe the voice is the doer, the owner of experience. It claims I see, I feel, I know. But these are just phrases, labels that gain weight only when we believe them. This impersonation is the mind's way of imitating presence. It narrates what's happening and attaches the word I, creating the illusion of a persistent self. Eventually, you'll find a divide, or in other words, a moment of direct perception before the thought or label shows up. That is the true self. And the reason we get caught in this misconception in the first place is that we believe the voice. We accept its stories as truth even though we really shouldn't, and in doing so, give it power. It becomes the filter through which we interpret reality. Neutral events are twisted into judgments. They ignored me. I shouldn't have said that. This isn't working. The voice assigns meaning and claims ownership over the emotional reactions. The voice sounds credible because it speaks in your current tone, shaped by your present self-image. It's tailored to your role and your history. In other words, it feels very accurate. But it's actually not really speaking from reality, but from conditioned patterns like fears, desires, memories, and beliefs that have been absorbed over time. The internal narrative is built from impressions like memories, fears, desires, past praise, and criticisms. For you see, it's really just an echo chamber, reorganizing what has already been absorbed. All it actually does is merely replaying familiar stories. These stories refer constantly to you, but when you try to find that you, all you encounter is a flimsy idea, not a solid entity. The identity the voice protects is a character that believes it needs to defend itself. The problem is that it's not an unchanging presence. It's a story, a role that keeps itself alive through repetition. Make no mistake, the voice's purpose is survival, not truth. It doesn't care whether its stories are pleasant or painful, only that they continue. Whether it tells you you're doing well or failing miserably, its goal is to hold your attention and reinforce its version of who you are. As long as you believe the stories, it remains in control. So, you see, believing the voice gives it power. When you accept its stories as reality, you are feeding the fantasy of a separate self. The great metamorphosis happens when you start to notice the voice rather than identify with it. Instead of reacting automatically, you observe the thoughts as passing ideas. So, instead of believing the thought, "I am anxious," you simply notice, "There's that voice again, repeating an old script." This act of noticing creates a space of awareness between the story and the observer. This space is the recognition that you are the awareness that perceives your thoughts. And make no mistake, thoughts may still come and go, but they no longer define you. You cease to be controlled by the stories. You become the silent witness instead. When you see thoughts as what they actually are, just thoughts, they still show themselves, but they no longer hijack your peace. There is no need anymore to suppress or fight them. You just stop giving them the final word. And of course, no one wants you to silence the mind or resist its content. All you do is simply realize that the stories are not you. They are passing phenomena, cars on the highway of awareness. Simply stop mistaking the noise for yourself so the illusion has a chance to disappear. The question isn't, how do I silence the voice, but rather, what is hearing the voice? That awareness is your true nature. And this awareness doesn't need commentary or labels. It simply perceives. It's a vivid presence, fully alive, yet silent, allowing the play of thoughts and emotions without being caught in them. This clarity is often overlooked. We search for enlightenment far away, but in reality it's right here, closer than any thought or story. It's something to recognize, not something to work toward. The moment you stop mistaking the noise for yourself, you realize that the you you've been chasing was never separate from this awareness. When the illusion of a solid self ends, even temporarily, you see that the true self is this attentive presence. Rather than being an object or a thing, it really is just the space in which all experiences happen. It's what witnesses the voice, the feelings, the sensations, and the thoughts. In the end, the voice may continue to speak, and it may still sound like you. But now, you see it for what it is. Nothing more than a conditioned echo, a collection of responses, in simple words, not the real you. You're the one listening, without effort or identification. Of course, this change isn't about fighting the mind or striving for silence, but really about remembering that the I who believes itself to be the voice is a delusion, nothing more than a story that can be seen through. The true self is the silent, yet aware presence that notices the stories without getting caught in them. The inner voice is a faithful servant of conditioning, a storyteller weaving narratives that reinforce the sense of separation. But it's a passing phenomenon in the giant space of awareness, not the master. When you realize this, the need to control or silence the voice falls away. You no longer identify with the stories. All you do is observe them, and in that simple act, the illusion of separation crumbles like an old cookie.